Good evening, everybody. I'm so happy that you're here. My name is Marisa Cermeño. I'm the chair of the Latino Caucus, and I'm calling this meeting to order. Thank you for coming. Welcome to our second hybrid meeting, and thank you to Building Momentum and Dr. Albert Vega for hosting. I hope you were able to join us early and join the entertainment tonight. A year and a half ago, I had to make a really hard decision. Don Bayer asked me to be on his kitchen cabinet for his election just when FCDC was reorganizing. I think chairs need to be absolutely neutral in primaries. So I did not run again for chair of the Mount Vernon Dems after building the committee to 150 members and winning the Committee of the Year award. Today, I have a similar situation. Most of you know that I am a candidate for Mount Vernon supervisor. I am so proud of the Latino Caucus, I cannot tell you. But tonight, I'm resigning as chair. I can never talk of all of you enough of giving me the privilege of leading our caucus. Thank you so much. But so to continue, I move that we elect a new chair tonight. And I will start the process by nominating Jairo Castro, one of our youngest and most active members. I have spoken with Jairo and he's willing to take the responsibility. I think he will do a great job. And I promise that I will stay involved and I help Jairo transition into being a great chair. Do I hear any other nominations for the floor? Does anybody on the screen would like to nominate? Raise your hand. Dominic, you want to say something? No. Oh, it's just a hand. Okay. Well, hearing none. Yes.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Okay. Do you want to attack you? You want to give him a speak?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Hey, Dominic.
So Dominic? Go.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
I'm sorry. Mount Vernon is on the same Zoom account, and so I'm trying to get them figured out and have their meeting start. Hi everyone. I'm Dominic Thompson. I'm the new FCDC Executive Director for FCDC, and I am so excited to be here and to work with Latino Caucus to help make sure that we are reaching out to communities and building up our bench and building up our base with all throughout Fairfax County and turning our county, winning all 50 seats that we have up this election cycle. Please feel free to reach out to me at my email if I can help you in any kind of way at executive.director at fairfax.org or fairfaxdems.org. And I look forward to working with Latino Caucus going forward.
Thank you, Dominic. I just want to be clear that right now we're nominating a new chair. If you have your hand raised for having extra nominations, is that the reason? Or otherwise, we're going to have to wait until the new chair give us the time to speak, right? So, hearing none, the congratulations, Jairo. You are the new Latino Caucus chair by acclamation.
Thank you so much, Marissa, for nominating me. You and Gil have really shown me what it means to get involved. I remember I've always had an interest in politics, and I've lived in Fairfax my whole life. Went to school here, elementary, middle school, high school, also attended George Mason University. And around the time of the January 6th insurrections, I figured it was time to get off the sidelines and get more involved. I went to my first FCDC meeting, and I got to meet Gil and Maritza, two very courageous Democrats. From then on, I joined the Latino Caucus, and I hope to make it thrive the way Maritza and Gil have. You guys have made the Latino Caucus very educational, fun, and engaging. For some of those that don't know me, I've met quite a few of you, but like I said, I was born in Peru, and I've been in this area since the age of 2. So without further ado, let's get this meeting underway. I know we have a long list of things to do tonight and some guest speakers. So because we're not all together in meeting using Zoom, we use something called unanimous consent. After I call for a motion to vote, I will call for unanimous consent, and not a second. If there are no objections, the motion is accepted. If there is an objection, I will call for a second, then for discussion, and then we will vote. Let's start by approving the agenda. Are there any objections to the agenda as presented? All right. We also have minutes from our last meeting. Are there any objections to the minutes for the last meeting? Oh. Did someone have their hand up? And as our last order of business, I move that we discuss the normal order. All right, so I move that we dispense our normal order so the chair can modify the agenda to accommodate visiting candidates and elected officials. Are there any objections? Screen? No? All right, hearing no objections, the motion is accepted, and we'll try to recognize special guests as they arrive, and so they can move on to their next event.
Well, after connect, can wait for a few moments, and you can have some of the people here who are not, who are candidates speak. Just for a minute or two. So you have to introduce each other? Or? Yeah, just ask the candidates.
There you
Well, I was just thinking that if Connect is here, if he does his speech, we can continue the finish the agenda, so everybody can talk, because we have people in the Zoom that wanna talk about their candidacy.
Okay, so introduce the next and
But then if you wanna have somebody coming, so if you talk, if you want, you doesn't have to wait, because he's out of town, right?
right.
Okay, so we can.
Yes.
All right, so we'll have Alexandria Councilman Canek Aguirre. Canek Aguirre is the first Latino ever to serve on the Alexandria City Council. Born and raised in Los Angeles, Canek is a community advocate and a progressive leader. He's also the son of Mexican immigrants, knows firsthand the importance of hard work, education, and ensuring everyone has a fair shot at the American dream. Canek is here to share his experience and on a recent educational trip to El Salvador with Representative Glenn Ivey of Maryland, others organized by Harrison, DC, and Alianza Americas. So, welcome, Councilman Canek.
So much, congratulations. Yeah. Shout out to Maritza for being able to establish the FCDC Latino Caucus in the first place. Very exciting to have that happen. In Alexandria, we still don't have a Latino Caucus, but we're working in little groups here and there. So yeah, why am I here tonight? Maritza had joined me on a YouTube session that I had from when I was part of a delegation to El Salvador. And so just wanted to share some of my experience from that with all of you tonight. It's a little weird having the audience here and then looking at the camera there, but we'll work with it. So I think first, just to level the field a little bit, people need to understand a little bit of the history of the country, right? It's a country that really has seen a lot of violent oppression and just violence overall for a long time, going from military juntas and dictatorships to a very long bloody civil war, and then having to deal with a lot of gangs in the mid-90s to almost the present. And for me, it was kind of a culmination of my own kind of life and wanting to travel to the country. Growing up in Los Angeles, of course, it's the #1 diaspora outside of the country of El Salvador, and numbers of Salvadorians living abroad. And so I grew up with a lot of Salvadorians, imbibing in culture and enjoying food and customs. And eventually coming out here to the DMV, this is actually the second largest diaspora outside of the country. So I've been around the culture for so long, and now with the Salvadorian population being the largest Latino population in the DMV, and for my own constituency here in Alexandria, I always thought it was important to, if you want to be a better public servant, if you want to be better at a service that you're providing, then you need to know some of the history of who you're trying to serve, right? So that's very important. And so, like I said, it's kind of a culmination for me to be able to finally visit the country and see firsthand what was happening there. It is intriguing. It is a little bit of a paradox. They are, first of all, the violence has gone way down. There's no debate about that. There's not the level of violence that's been in the country for decades, and everyone acknowledges that. And the majority of the population finally feels that they could go outside and have lunch, not worried about being robbed. That they could send their child to school, not worried that the child's not going to come home because they're being stopped by gangs, or that their daughter could go outside and they're not worried that their daughter might get raped. So that's an extremely big deal. Like I said, we need to try and level things so people have an understanding of what's going on. Now, on the political side, so about 4 years ago, Nayib Bukele was elected president. And a couple of years after that, his new party won a veto-proof majority in the legislature. And shortly after that, they passed a law saying that anyone over a certain age can be on a part of the Supreme Court, which is essentially a way to dissolve the Supreme Court and take complete control of the judiciary branch. So you have a government that is in control of the executive, the legislature, and the judicial branch, all three. And once they kind of took over with that power, they put into effect a state of exemption, which essentially means they can pick people up off the street, not have to go to trial, and place people in jail, whether they were in a gang or not, whether they had committed a crime or not. So it's been this very strange interchanging of civil liberties for peace, right? Because who are we as a country to judge another country when all they've known is violence? And now that they're seeing peace, and I have, several friends that are Salvadorian, and I've even heard on the radio and in conversations, they've said, well, if Bukele decides to be a dictator, I hope he's a dictator for life. So it's an interesting, like I said, interchange of what you're seeing as I'm proud of my country and I feel like I can actually live my life and not have to live in fear. And so that's a very powerful thing to have to try and digest. And sorry, let me take a quick step back. I have to give credit to FCDC one more time and Alianza Americas. They've actually been doing these delegations for, I think almost 2 decades now. But it was very, very intense. We were going 14 hours a day. We would start at 7 a.m. We'd have a speaker for breakfast. We'd go have meetings with government or non-government NGOs. Then we'd have lunch, have a speaker. Then we'd go to more meetings. And then we'd go to dinner and have another speaker. And then we'd go to bed. Because like I said, it was 14 hours in the day, and it was all very rapid fire that was going on. We had the chance to speak with high-level government officials from El Salvador, including the ambassador. We also spoke with USAID as well as the ambassador from the US. stopping by the embassy. And of course, like I said, we've talked to some non-governmental agencies or organizations, as well as academia and the media, if you will. And those conversations, I think, were a little bit more impactful because we don't know what direction the government's going to go in. It's kind of like a hammer hanging by a thread. Technically, in El Salvador, by the Constitution, the president can only run once. The current president has found a loophole, or others would argue it's not a loophole. I'm not going to argue one way or the other. But by saying that he's going to step away from the presidency for 6 months, he's not the president, so then he could run for office, and he's seeking another term. He will most undoubtedly win. Currently, he has about an 85% approval rating. And this is not from internal, polling. This is actually from external polling. So this is why we know what's going on. So when he wins the next presidency, the question is going to become if the country is still, because it is a very, very poor country. Socioeconomically, it's at the bottom of the Western Hemisphere. I would argue that probably Haiti is the only other country that's in a worse condition than El Salvador currently. There's not a lot of jobs. There's been a lot of corruption for a long time. When we're talking about root causes of migration and immigration, this is one of those things, right? Because people from El Salvador have been coming to this country for decades to flee violence, to find jobs, to have an opportunity. And the other one that I wasn't totally aware of and found out more about was the environment. Something like 90% of the water in El Salvador is some type of contaminated and not really usable, which is a very, very scary thing. Because when we talk about privatization of water, that's like one of my biggest fears in the world. And then when you look at the rural areas trying to get water, they're willing to pay to get the water, but the problem is the water usually doesn't show up on time, if it shows up at all. And then in contrast, in the urban areas, everyone complains that the water is too expensive, but at the same time, about 70% of the water is lost in transit, which is really crazy to think about. 70%. Once the water gets to you for you to make your coffee, make your tea, make your soup, make rice, or just to drink it, 70% of it has already been lost. So there's a lot of infrastructure issues that need to be looked at and taken care of. So we're going to see. It's kind of a wait and see once he becomes president again, how he will continue to treat the media and academia, because it was kind of a similar relationship that the last administration had with the media, where it's, oh, fake media, and that's not real. The difference is they are very, very effective at spinning messages and putting the message out there. There's a stat out there that on social media, to make something go viral, to get a conversation going, it usually takes anywhere from like 24 to 48 hours. With the Pele administration, they're actually able to do it in 12 to 18 hours. So they're basically putting on a world-class clinic when it comes to social media and driving messaging. So very, very effective. Another thing that I noted that I will give credit for, within the government, there was definitely more of a youth movement. The president himself, I believe, is early 40s, and a lot of the folks that we were interacting with were young, a lot of women, so they're definitely being given an opportunity. There's an interesting contrast with our own U.S. government, because when we went to the embassy, it skewed older, white, and male. So just small things that I was kind of picking up while we were traveling. So it's an interesting place to be right now in the country and its history, and to be curious to see where we move on. And the interaction with the U.S. is, the history with the U.S. and Latin America is a very long-standing one. There's always been an interaction, a relationship going back to the Monroe Doctrine, and And El Salvador is actually, from a military standpoint, in a very strategic position when you're talking about getting from El Salvador to the tip of Argentina and from El Salvador back up to the United States. So there's a lot going on, and it's a very, very complicated situation. But it's a beautiful country, beautiful people. They're trying to get by. They want to stay in their country. That's what basically everybody said. If I didn't have to go, I wouldn't go. I want to be back home. But I either didn't have an opportunity. I was afraid for my life. The environment destroyed my area where I lived, and I couldn't live there anymore. So we're just trying to look to see how the U.S. can support in different ways. I'm hoping to go back. One of the things that USAID was talking about was how do you get more civic engagement at the local level? And so I'm hoping the next couple of years I might be able to set something up to go back to the country and talk about local civic engagement. And I think that might be about it. Unless, but I'm happy to take some questions from folks. See if the screen's got any questions.
Unmute yourself.
Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question or comment.
So I'm going to ask one.
Sure.
Okay, El Salvador has been the center of an awful lot of attention.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying things are actually getting better.
So that's a complicated question. So Gil just asked me if things are getting better, and I would say it depends on what you're talking about specifically. If it's the environment, no. If it's employment, not really. If it's violent, yes, 100%. The country is in a much better position. Like I said, and the violence really stemmed a lot of other opportunities, right? Like you're scared to open your business because someone's going to come and try to get money from you, right? It's going to be a shakedown, and that's not happening the way it was before. So it's, yeah, in that sense, it's 100% good news. Yeah. So again, it's.
Is there any migration from the other of the triangle there into there because it's a little more calm now?
You know, interestingly, there is some. I'm trying to remember which country is more destabilized right now. If it's Honduras or Nicaragua. Phone a friend. Anybody know? I'm trying to. I can't remember if it's Honduras or Nicaragua that's going through. Like a better word, leadership change. Honduras, yeah. So there are Hondurans that are actually coming into El Salvador for some of that, yeah.
But not up here. So if it stabilizes there, in other words, it might reduce some of the problems at our border.
Theoretically, yes. So the issue goes back to the other things that are still going on. So while people might not be fleeing violence, they are fleeing. They are leaving because of labor opportunities, you know, food. One of the things is that the country imports a lot of its food. It doesn't have a lot of opportunity to be able to feed its own people from within the country, if you will. So again, it's a trade-off.
Are there any more questions? Oh, Albert, have a question.
Yeah.
Are there plans to do delegations to other countries, or is this a pilot, or is this expanding?
Are there plans for other delegations? Are there plans for other delegations, whether to this to the same country or to other countries? So, like I said, Alianza Americas and Carecen have been doing delegations to El Salvador for a couple of decades now. So they will continue to do so. I didn't hear any plans of them stopping. Delegations to other countries, at some point it becomes a money thing too, right? I'm actually curious. It's a question I kind of want to ask Representative Byer when he gets here, because I would love to go on a delegation to a couple other countries. I joked with Congressman Glenn Ivey. He wants to put together a delegation to go to Ethiopia because we have a very, very large diaspora of Ethiopians here in the DMV, and not gonna lie, I definitely hang on to that one. I'd love to do that. So I think the bigger thing is if money weren't an issue, delegations are extremely important. I don't think that we expose ourselves enough to the world and to what else is going on. We're kind of insulated in our bubbles, if you will. And I'm not saying that as a critique in a bad way. It's just that the world's a big place, but it's gotten a lot smaller. And the global interactions are very, very real. And so it really behooves us to be able to understand what is happening in other countries and how that interaction affects us when we're in our own country.
Early in the administration, Vice President Harris was sent to Central America to discuss public-private partnerships to encourage, to make it possible for more people to stay, so there's less pressure on them to leave for economic reasons, etc. And I was wondering if there was any development of that or any review for.
Repeat his question. So.
Yeah, so the question was that recently, within the last couple of years, Vice President Kamala Harris was talking about public-private partnerships and even went down to Central America to talk about some of this. And the question is, is there any opportunity growing from that? I am not in a position to be able to answer that question for you. What I will say is that, unfortunately, looking from a historical context, there's been a lot of corruption. So then a lot of times the money doesn't make it to where it needs to go, or you have projects that are half built. So that's kind of consistently been a problem. The hope is that at some point the development will happen or investments in infrastructure will happen, and that puts people to work. It gives them a skill set, and hopefully then helps to stabilize the economy and the country, right? To the point that you're bringing up. And then folks that would be dealing with the root causes of migration, because if you're in a stable place, then you're more likely to stay there, right? But unfortunately, that just hasn't been what's played out.
I guess a lot was primarily to promote American private investment.
Yeah, no, definitely to show to try and highlight the investments that the U.S. has been trying to make in Latin America, for sure. Absolutely. There's a question in the way back. Light manufacturing in El Salvador. A lot of folks work in factories and it's textile. So light manufacturing, yeah. I can't remember if there was heavy industry. I don't think there was, but light manufacturing, textiles, yeah. It was, the way it was described to me was things will show up to be put together, and then sometimes it'll be completed, but sometimes it won't, and it'll be shipped off somewhere else too for the final completion.
Anybody online? Anyone online have questions?
Any online questions? Going once. Going twice. Well, really appreciate y'all giving me the opportunity to share a little bit of my experience. The delegation I took to El Salvador, like I said, I think it's extremely important for us to be able to learn about other cultures and countries and the situations that are going on, so that we can not only serve folks better here in our own areas, but also have a little bit of sympathy and empathy as to what's going on in other countries, and as to it makes some of these boogeyman situations have a little bit more sense, right? Because people will say, well, why are people coming here? Why can't they just stay in their own countries? And this goes a very long way to explain to people why. And with that, I will hand it over to Zane.
Thank you so much, Councilman Kanik, for giving us some insight on the situation in El Salvador. It sounds like they need a lot of our help, along with just focus on their country. Are there any candidates here that want to speak? While we're waiting for Representative Don Beyer.
Thank you so much for giving me a few minutes to talk about my candidacy. My name is All right, my name is Young Moon. I'm running for school board at large. I have already served for 20 years before I retired in 2019. And I am trying to return to the school board because, as you know, that out of 12 current incumbent Democratic school board members, 7 have chosen not to run for re-election. So they're losing a lot of experience. So, on the next point, someone like me with a 20 years of experience in institutional knowledge and unique perspective as an immigrant, former ESS students, and first went to a college, growing up in extreme poverty, and practicing law for 49 years, small business owner, father of 2 sons who graduated from Texas County Public Schools, is going to be very helpful. So that we can continue providing a as best, quality education possible as we can for our 180,000 students. When I was hearing from Councilman Koenig about his trip to El Salvador, and thinking about my first appearance before Latino Caucus, is it reminded me of why my family came to the U.S. back in 1974, because my parents wanted to provide a better future for their 3 kids. We were living in really, really poor area. Back in 1970s, unlike the Korea today, back in 1970, Korea was a poor third world country. We struggled having 3 meals a day. And my mother at one point, we had to pay tuition to go to Michigan High School. My mother had to sell her readings to come up with the tuition money to pay for my tuition for middle school. It was a bad issue, and I lost my own 2 younger brothers because my parents were not able to take my brothers to go to see a doctor, get a medical care. They helplessly watched them die. It is that kind of extreme poverty I was living in, and I bring a perspective of having lived their life. Davis County is a wealthy county, but we also have a wealth gaps. 27% of our students live in poverty. Many of our Latino students, I bet that about half of them learn English as a second language, which I had to do as a high school kid back in 1970s at T.C. Williams, now Alexandria City Public Schools. So I lived what many of our college students are living in Fairfax, living in poverty, learning English as a second language, having both their parents uneducated, lacking language skills, working long hours, 2 jobs, etc. That's what my parents did, had to do support the family. So I found my campaign is very strong. I appreciate your support. At the straw poll the other day, I came out at the top amongst 6 largest global candidates, but I need your continued support and your vote when we actually go to endorsement voting. And thank you. And I am heading out to a Mount Vernon District Committee meeting through June. So I'm going to get my car and then I'm going to join them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. Up next, we have Albert Vega, candidate for Springfield Supervisor.
Oh, I'm not teasing you.
Okay, see you. Hello, everybody. Again, thank you very much for coming out tonight. Good to see you and good to see everybody on internet land also. Again, my name is Albert Vega, running for Springfield Supervisor. If you haven't got the chance to meet me, I'm an electrical engineer. I'm a small business founder. Just want to problem solve for the county the same way I've been doing for the last 25 years in these 2 areas. Definitely want to focus on affordable housing, workforce development, environment, public safety, transportation. There's a long list to be doing because our current supervisor hasn't been problem solving that well. And I want to bring problem solving back to Springfield. That's pretty much it. Please feel free to come talk to me. The one thing I do want to mention is that coming up on April 8th, we're having our day of action. It'll be at my house in Springfield. We're going to launch at 1 o'clock, have a couple speeches, lots of activities. There'll be door knocking, there'll be postcarding, activities for kids, there'll be snacks. And yeah, we'll just have a great event, start to reach out and spread the word. And on the day before, on April 7th, that's actually my birthday. I'm not going to tell anybody how old I'm getting, 46. But it's going to be here at Building Momentum. People can come. If you come, I'm going to be making my grandmother's mole. So you'll be treated to a little bit of what my family used to cook.
And yeah, just love to have you attend. And yeah, all the information, I think Eddie Berkel's putting everything on the Zoom chat. So any questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out. Good to see you, and good to see you on the internet. Thank you so much, Albert. Up next, we have Shaimali. You could unmute yourself. I believe you're online.
Hey, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm Shamali House, and I'm running for House District 7 over here in Ruston. This is the district that Ken Plum is vacating and not running for re-election in. Some of you know me as having co-chaired Diversity and Outreach and also co-chair the Veterans in Military Families Caucus. But to introduce myself to those who don't know me, I'm a veteran, an immigrant, a community organizer, and a mom of a trans non-binary child. And I know firsthand the harmful effects of the Youngkin administration's policies and the far-right administration and what it has on our youth. But tonight, for this caucus, I would like to share a couple of policy points that I think are salient. Growing up as an immigrant child, I knew that if I got sick, my parents would have to pay out of pocket because we didn't have health care. And it was a decision that we had to make whether or not we went to the doctor. So it's really important to me that all families, regardless of immigration status, are able to access health care. So I would support health care for all. And it's a bill that both Delegate Kathy Tran and Senator McClellan championed in this last cycle, and there was funding put in from the Senate side, but not on the House side. This is something that I would definitely champion because no child should fear whether or not they can pay their bills or their parents can pay bills because of a medical situation. The second thing that I think is really important and salient to this group is language access. It's something that here in the AAPI community, we are also very concerned with. We've been working on language access issues in Democratic Asian Americans of Virginia, of which I've been on the leadership team. And I would continue to support access to language because throughout the Commonwealth, whatever your primary language is should not be a barrier to you getting services, whether it's in a county or whether it's from the state. So this is something that I think Delegate Tran and Senator Hushme were forefront on, and you can count on my support in those two areas for sure. In addition, I would be stalwart champion for LGBTQ plus rights. I would stand up for women's rights. I worked on getting the Equal Rights Amendment across the finish line, and you will see me. I advocated for abortion rights this last session, which unfortunately didn't pass, but we will make sure that abortion is legal and fair and reproductive freedom is maintained in the Commonwealth. In addition, having affordable and attainable housing is really important to me. And those of you who know, I've been working for Supervisor Alcorn for the past 3 years on multimodal transportation, public safety, and the arts. So transportation issues, especially issues with transit, are incredibly important to me. Making sure communities are walkable and bikeable, making sure that people have access to transit and can get to and from work and all of the things that they want to do in their daily lives is incredibly important. I hope I can gain your support. I look forward to talking with you more and learning more about issues that are important to you. My name is Shamali House for House District 7.
Thank you so much, Shamali, for sharing. Up next, we have Saddam Salim.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me tonight. I really appreciate the time to speak to you. My name is Saddam Salim. I'm running for State Senate in Senate District 37th. And of course, you know, my story is no different than a lot of folks in this room and a lot of folks in the district where got displaced by climate change, came from Bangladesh in the summer of 2000. And as soon as we got here, we found ourselves to be homeless. In a first world country, to be homeless was kind of shocking. And from there, you know, we lived in basements, we lived in couches and spare bedrooms, where family and friends and people that we didn't even know took us in Falls Church and Fairfax County area. And from there, we sort of worked our way through finding affordable housing, finding affordable healthcare. And that's where my mom discovered that her abdominal pain was more than just, you know, a regular pain where she needed emergency surgery because she gave birth to 3 children overseas without medical supervision. as a result of that, I stayed back home to make sure that I was with my family, helped them out when they needed. Went to Northern Virginia Community College, did the 2 years. Went to Mason and did the 4-year, and then got my master's and came out with 0 student loan debt while my parents were making less than $50,000 a year and trying to make sure they feed their family. So that's really, the story of how I got here. And over the last couple of years, I've gotten well involved with local Democratic committees, helped build the Black Caucus, helped build the API Caucus, where folks did not have a say in what their issues were and got them to the table. As a result of that, I have learned that the incumbent right now is not paying any attention to us. He's not paying any attention to his constituents, and people want change. That's when I stepped it up. And the moment that I stepped it up was when my niece was born last December. Seeing her, seeing my mom, seeing my sister, and my sister-in-law in the same room had made me realize that when it comes to reproductive rights, when it comes to labor rights, when it comes to education, all that stuff is being rolled back and no one's fighting for them. So that's when I stepped up and said, I'm going to go ahead and fight for them. I'm going to fight for communities of color. I'm going to fight for everyone. And of course, that's why I'm running. Again, I'll keep it short. Again, Saddam Salim running for state Senate. I'll put my information on the chat, and hopefully I can earn your support until June 20th. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saddam, for sharing. Up next, we have Erica Yalowitz, candidate for state Senate. Unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening. My name is Erica Yalowitz. Many of you know me already. I'm a first-generation Colombian American. I grew up in Colombia during the really difficult times, civil war and the drug war. And we learned what a tough economic crisis is, what tough social crisis is, what an armed conflict is. I am running to make sure that we bring gun safety and safety from fentanyl and access to drugs in our community. I have been a court officer in juvenile and domestic relations court for the last decade. I have been serving our kids and families on the worst day of their lives when they come to file for child protective orders for abuse and neglect, protective orders for domestic violence, or any juvenile issues, juvenile criminal justice issues. So I see firsthand, I work directly with the families, most of them immigrants, most of them Hispanic and Latino families coming for help to help their kids deal with a situation of addiction to fentanyl. And there are no services. There's nothing between punitive action and Narcan in our communities right now, locally. We are sending kids to Manassas for a treatment center, and that is not okay when we have some of the most wealthy or the wealthiest jurisdictions in Virginia and the US. So we need services. We need more attention to this issue. In addition to the Medicaid issue, effective April 1st, we are going to see a downfall in access to Medicaid for immigrants especially, and we need to act on it to extend the healthcare services that we had during the pandemic, because this is coming up in our community. So I want to have your support. I'm asking you for your support humbly. I really need hands to knock doors, hands to dial phones and make phone calls, hands to write postcards and win this race. And I am ready. I have been knocking doors from early in the morning till late at night, talking with voters. And I see that people are very receptive, and I'm very glad that they want a Latina to come to the state Senate for the first time in history. So I hope you all will come and join me. And thank you so much. I am putting my information in the chat. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much, Erica, for sharing. Up next, we have Chris Falcone running for clerk of the court.
Hey everyone, how you doing? Jairo, congratulations, man. Big shoes to fill, but I know you're going to be able to do it. And Maritza, congratulations as well. Everyone, I'm Chris Falcon, and I'm running for Fairfax Clerk of the Court, longtime Latino Caucus member. I'm sorry I can't be with you guys there tonight. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Chris Falcon. As I said, I'm running for the clerk, and this is a county-wide position that's only on the ballot every 8 years. So we have a real opportunity here in Fairfax County this year. For those of you that aren't aware, the clerk of the court has been Republican held for the last 32 years by the same person. And he is retiring this year. So this is an open seat and it's an opportunity to flip this. So I got asked recently by a friend, why does having a Democrat as clerk of court even matter? It's an administrative job. I thought that was an interesting question. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about that. It matters because I can tell you I've been deputy clerk of the court in Arlington in my second home down Columbia Pike from where I live here in Annandale. Even though I'm a lifelong Fairfax resident, I work in Arlington and I've been serving there for 8.5 years. And here's some of the things we've been doing. We've been offering services during non-traditional hours. So people were able to come on a Saturday who work Monday through Friday and may not normally be able to come to the courthouse can come Saturday mornings and do some services like petition for expungement to remove charges from their criminal record for things they were never convicted of. We've also been able to offer enormous breadth of language access by hiring diverse people in that office. We've been also able to provide access to legal aid services directly at our office. Instead of turning people away when they come with legal problems, we can actually connect them to resources so that they can help themselves. So we've done a number of other things. I know a lot of you here have heard my stump speech before, but some of you haven't, so bear with me. But it matters. It also matters in terms of public safety. We have a lot of things that we handle at the clerk's office that affect your public safety day to day, including our red flag laws, substantial risk orders. I personally handle those in Arlington County. Every single substantial risk order that has been issued in Arlington County has come across my desk over the last 2.5 years. So that kind of experience matters, and I won't need training. On day one, I will hit the ground running once I'm elected your clerk of court. So a couple of things, a quick announcement. We have an event coming up Saturday in McLean. We're doing a little fundraiser. I'll put some details in the chat for you guys. We'd love to have you come find out what it's about. And I'll also have my contact information there. But I really want to thank you all for your time, and it's good to see you guys. I hope to see you in person next time.
Thanks so much for sharing. Up next, we have Kelvin Garcia.
Good evening, Latino Caucus. My name is Kelvin Garcia, and I am running for the next sheriff of Fairfax County and trying to be the first Latino ever to hold such position. Quick background around me is I was raised by a single mother who immigrated from the Dominican Republic at 18 years old. Growing up, I saw two possible paths for my life. I could strive to become the man I wanted to be, or I could follow the downward spiral I've seen too many people from similar circumstances fall into. That's what led me to serve for 11 years with MPD, DC Police, while earning both my master's of public administration from Virginia Tech, and I have a Juris Doctorate from UDC David A. Clark School of Law. I want to bring my on-the-ground experience and legal administrative expertise to improve our sheriff's office and build a safer and more just Fairfax County. The current sheriff, produced a lot of staffing shortages, and that results in good programs being neglected, leaving communities vulnerable. Stands up for bad cops that use excessive force. Defends the abuse of transgender inmates, and abuses the paid call system in our jails to earn corporate kickbacks. It's time for a fresh perspective in the sheriff's office. I'll work with I'll work to break the revolving door that is our criminal justice system. I'll reform the broken practices currently in place in our jail, and I'll partner with prosecutors to put progressive ideas into actions to build a more safer, more just Fairfax County. And with that said, I hope that on May 4th or June 20th, I have your support, and Kelvin Garcia, and I hope I can count on that support. And I will leave all my information on the group chat so that y'all could check me out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelvin, for sharing. Up next, we have Paul Berry. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. First of all, Maritza, congratulations on your leadership. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for everything that you've done to build this caucus. My name is Paul Berry. I am running for the 7th House of Delegates District that's in Reston in Western Fairfax County. I am Mexican American. I have been involved with our community for years. I'm very proud to have the endorsement of Councilmember Kenneth Aguirre, Delegate Alfonso Lopez, Delegate Elizabeth Guzman, and many others. Please go to my website, electberry.com, to see all my endorsements. I was endorsed today by Juntos por Virginia. The work that I've been doing for years as an educator in Fairfax County Public Schools and as a member with the Medical Reserve Corps here in Fairfax County has led me to this moment. When I wasn't on the front lines of the pandemic response, working with our neighborhoods in Annandale, in Herndon, in Springfield, and other places, I was on the front lines of the policy response. In 2018, Governor Northam appointed me to the Virginia Latino Advisory Board. And in 2020, just a few weeks before the pandemic, I became chair of the board. Latinos in Virginia represent about 12% of the population, but at COVID's peak, our community was 50% of all deaths. And it was my job to advise the governor on the policy response. As someone who is Latino, this wasn't just a policy issue for me, it was very personal. So when I recommended to the governor to do things like expand maternal health services for undocumented mothers who have American citizen children, that was me responding to the crisis. When I suggested to the governor that we start a mobile health clinic program to reach communities that don't have healthcare access, it got done. I did things like recommend to the governor that we increase the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in Virginia, eliminate the 40-quarter eligibility requirement for Medicaid. My work in Richmond, paired with the work on the ground here in Fairfax County, is what we need from a General Assembly member. I have a proven record that you can go to online right now and see where my values are. The reports and recommendations and policy ideas that I gave to Governor Northam, many of them turned into legislation and were passed into law. And those things are all on my website. You can go there right now. I talk about climate. I talk about education. As an educator, it's very, very important to me that we increase teacher salaries, we build new schools, and all the other ideas that I'm bringing to the table are available for you to view online right now. So again, my name is Paul Berry. I'm running for the House of Delegates in the 7th District here in Fairfax County. It's in Reston. If you want to reach out, my phone number is on the website, or you can send me an email. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Up next, we have Spencer Top.
Hi, everyone. Really happy to be with you tonight representing Jennifer Carroll Foy's campaign for State Senate District 33, covering parts of Fairfax and Prince William counties. Really appreciate the conversation and community building happening tonight and to be a part of it. To those of you who don't know Jennifer Carroll Foy, she is a former foster mom and one of the first Black women to graduate from Virginia Military Institute. In 2017, Jennifer became the first public defender to serve in the House of Delegates, where she was ranked at the top of her class in effectiveness, leading the fight to expand Medicaid, ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, clean up toxic coal ash ponds, and raise the minimum wage. Jennifer Carroll Foy is running for the State Senate District 33 to pass a pro-labor, pro-education, pro-environment agenda that stands up against the Republicans in Richmond, who we all know are trying to do the exact opposite. That's why she is the only candidate in this race that is endorsed by labor unions and our local school board members. To those of you who do know Jen, I'd love to let you know that last week we turned in our over 450 signatures to officially qualify for the ballot, which we collected from every single precinct in SD 33. So that, combined with our recent endorsement from CASA in Action, is just a reminder to all of us and to Jennifer that we know there are a lot of folks in Virginia who are vulnerable to the Youngkin agenda and are looking to her and our campaign to accomplish our goals on what is a labor-powered, volunteer-led campaign. So I'm hoping tonight you will stand with the over 20 elected officials in Fairfax County who have endorsed our campaign and sign up to volunteer. We have 2 really great weekends of action coming up to celebrate the opening of our field offices, plus weekly phone banking opportunities you can do from home. So I'll post the link to join those in the chat, and you can also find them on the FCDC calendar to those of you in person. Thank you so much.
so much, Spencer. And thank you so much to all of our speakers and candidates here today. Unfortunately, Congressman Don Beyer had some technical issues and he will be unavailable to join us tonight. So we're going to go ahead and start wrapping up the meeting.
He's on the
I think
call
he's,
right now.
I think he's here.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, he's on the call.
Congressman, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right.
Sorry I'm late, but for better or worse.
All right. Congressman Don Beyer from the 8th District.
Well, thanks. I'm happy to wait, but I just wanted to give you a quick update on my trip to Central America last month. I'd gone in 2019, led by Senator Tom Carper, and the whole point of the purpose of the trip was to look at the root cause strategy, and see how it was working. So we went to Mexico for a couple of days. We had a 3-hour meeting with AMLO, the president of Mexico, and then went to Guatemala for 2 days, and had another 3-hour meeting with the president of Guatemala, and then headed to Honduras for 2 days. We were in San Pedro Sula rather than Tegucigalpa. And we didn't meet with the president because she was in Spain at the time. But really quickly, because I don't want to dominate your meeting at all, but just the notes I took in no particular order. Number one, we need to really address the de minimis trade amounts right now. Right now, we get 2 million packages a day, half of them from China, that are not inspected at all. They're not subject to any tariffs or anything like that, because we give an $800 exclusion on packages. If it's less than $800, they don't have to look through it. So not only is this where fentanyl comes in, but it really hurts us with our CAFTA Dominican Republic free trade agreement, which is the Central American Free Trade Agreement. The second big thing is they're really trying to develop the textile industries, but the garment companies, the people like the Navy, are trying to get around it by buying the yarn in Southeast Asia and then importing the yarn into places like Guatemala and Honduras to have them sew it there, rather than using yarn that's or originates in Latin America. It's called Yarn Forward. We're leading an effort to bring the Peace Corps back to Honduras and Guatemala. They left during COVID because of COVID, but it's time to really get them back. We expanded the H-2B visas for Guatemala, a legitimate way for folks to come from 2,000 to 10,000 last year. The president asked us to expand it to 50,000, which we were going to try to figure out how to do. In Honduras, all through that region, there's real issues with the rule of law, with perceived corruption. So we're trying to bring back the new Honduran president's open to bringing back the UN CCIH, which is the independent UN prosecutor investigators, to try to make sure that we minimize the corruption as best we can. One of the things that really struck me was the total absence of family planning in Central America. Not only it's just not about abortions, it's like there's no birth control. They don't sell condoms. Nobody's getting the pill or any other contraceptive type devices. So the ability for young women and even young families to plan their families just doesn't exist. One of the long-term things we have is that the so-called first families of Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador, the families that had all the money 50 years ago and 100 years ago and 150 years ago, still are sort of the backbone of the polite society and the educated ones and the ones with beautiful homes. But we got to make sure when we do the corruption investigations, what happens is they feel particularly threatened. And we've got to find a way to make those first families parts of the solution rather than the enemies. Another thing that really jumped out at us is the 1 million asylum applicant backlog in the United States right now is an enormous obstacle to making any progress on our innovation stuff. There were a bunch of other things that were smaller and technical. We really came back with a full agenda of things we can do to help the root cause strategy work. And it really does seem to be, we were comparing how many people were coming without papers from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador 3 years ago compared to today, and it's about 10% as many. There's a much better effort to actually make it possible to stay in their home countries. And as you know, most of them they're either fleeing abject poverty and hunger, or they're fleeing high murder rates and sexual assault. And anything we can do to make the countries more livable, it's going to obviously help solve the problems at the border. The border is a much more complicated issue than that. And big picture, one of my greatest frustrations is that when we look at all the things Congress has been successful and unsuccessful at doing, the most unsuccessful is dealing with immigration in a responsible way. You know, we desperately need people. Every business I know is in desperate need of people. And yet we have so many people who would love to come to America, especially from our own hemisphere. And yet we make it really, really difficult. Anyway, I'm looking forward to going back many times in the years to come and making sure that we are trying to be part of the solution to the problem of our own neighbors, our own fellow Americans. And with that, I yield back. Happy to take any questions, but also don't want to
Thank you so much.
Inappropriately long.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for sharing about your trip to Central America. I think we do have some questions. If anyone virtually or in-house wants to ask something. Oh, Don Simon, go ahead.
Yeah, very good. I was just wondering whether you see any positive prospects in any of the countries that you visited to get buy-in from the senior leadership for any root cause strategy that you may come up with.
John, it's really interesting that you asked that. All three, but both of the presidents and the leaders in Honduras, because we didn't meet the president, all of them articulate a really strong commitment to getting rid of the corruption. For example, in Mexico, the president AMLO has so little trust in the police and the structures there, both the national police and the local police, and in the attorney general and the prosecutors, that he's turned over all of the law enforcement at the ports to the Navy and on land to the Army. Because in his mind, at least, he feels that the military are much less corrupt, much less in the sway of the cartels. In Guatemala, they've sent the last couple of presidents off to prison. And once again, the president there seemed very committed to trying to root out the corruption as best possible, with the one exception that a lot of the international anti-corruption people wanted those first families, those 7 or 8 families, to basically be prosecuted. And the families, I've got this from a couple of different trips, that one of the things that means is that they won't be able to travel to the United States, and they won't be able to travel to Europe. And it's not so much restitution as the impact on their lives moving forward. And it's difficult. You just imagine if in this country we're trying to take on the Rockefellers and the Gates and then this and then that, and we don't do it. In fact, just look at the way we treat corporations. After SVP, nobody's going to jail. If the financial crimes, we just look the other way. We find them, but nobody pays a criminal penalty. And that's what they're trying to make happen in Guatemala too. Honduras is a little stranger because this is a relatively far left president who was ousted by the military in 2009. Now, after all these years, his wife has been elected the president, and they're doing it sort of as a twosome. But he's really leaning into Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, and just this last week abandoned Taiwan after all these years to reach out to the PRC, China. So there's the danger there that while most of his, he's very anti-corruption, which is good, but we got to make sure that he didn't chase off all the employers that we want there too to create the jobs and grow things. Is finding a middle ground, that you don't bend so far left that you end up with something like Nicaragua that is a disaster, especially a human rights disaster.
Thank you so much, Congressman. The next question is from candidate for Mount Vernon Supervisor, Maritza.
Thank you, Hiram. Hi, Don. Thanks for coming. I know that you had a very short visit in Mexico, and you know my family is from there, and they're very concerned that the present president is trying to really mock our democracy. Do you think that Biden can have a good relationship and work together with him to make sure that we have a very safer borders and that he doesn't take Mexico to, I don't want to say communism, but he's really working hard to destroy our democracy? Do you have any word on that?
Yeah, Maritza, thank you very much. That was a concern while we were there, and an even bigger concern after we left. Because you see, AMLO in Mexico is doing in a parallel what Netanyahu is trying to do in Israel, which is to defang the courts and to make the Supreme Court not the ultimate arbiter of what's constitutional and what's not. Netanyahu is trying to do it because he wants to stay out of jail. That's not why AMLO is doing it. He's doing it because he felt that he won an election some years ago and it was taken from him, that there was lots of election fraud. I'm not qualified to comment on whether it was true or not. I'm hoping that there's been so much international disapproval of what they've tried to do in Mexico that he will back down, just as Netanyahu has backed down. But I don't think that, I also do think the reason why AMLO is doing that is not so much to create an autocracy, but is for fear that the old guard is going to take over again, throw him out, and move the country back in the wrong direction. That's not a reason to undermine democracy, but these are what's inspiring that. By the way, there's so much else good going on in Mexico that we need to keep it all in perspective. There was a great story last week about the hardest workers in the world. And we were, like 18th or something like that, number of hours worked. Mexico was first or second. They were very, very hard workers. And that means also, by the way, just like us too, their number one economic problem is they can't find enough workers for the jobs that they have, which is pretty exciting. Instead of having a Mexico with lots of people out of work trying to, and even though their average wage is nowhere near where it needs to be, it's much higher than it was 20 years ago. And hopefully will continue to be higher. The USMCA, the landmark trade agreement with Mexico and Canada, is really doing very good things for the North American continent.
Thank you so much, then. Thank you.
Thanks, Maritza.
Thank you, Congressman Dodd. Next we have Federico Cura.
Congressman, thank you so much. I'm concerned about fentanyl and the threat that the nation faces with the opioids and synthetic drugs, especially in schools and such. Can you repeat? So I didn't quite catch. You said that how is the drug coming into the U.S. that you mentioned? You mentioned something. Can you repeat that? I didn't quite catch it.
And Federico, I didn't say much about it, except that it's always a topic of conversation, because we do believe that the vast majority of fentanyl that comes to the United States comes through Mexico. We do also believe that most of it's manufactured in China and is shipped to Mexico and comes in. My Republican friend's perspective is that it is brought over the border by coyotes and backpacks. I think that the DEA believes that almost all of it is coming at the regular transshipment points, Ciudad Juarez, San Diego, in trucks. And right now we're only examining 5% of the trucks that come through. So you got a 95% chance of getting that fentanyl in back. By the way, enough fentanyl to fill one F-150 truck bed is enough to kill everybody in America. You don't need a lot of space to bring in a lot of really deadly fentanyl. One of the things they just worked out between the US and Mexico is new technology to examine many, many more of the trucks. And again, I'm not an expert on whether there's a scent thing that goes on and they can smell the fentanyl or how they test for it, but we keep trying to use ever better technology to stop it at the border. But in the meantime, the dilemma is not just very few of us are willingly taking fentanyl now, but they're putting it in marijuana, they're putting it in Percocet, they're putting it in a lot of other things and getting the kids hooked in small amounts in the hopes that they will take it. And it's much, as you know, much, much, much more dangerous than even heroin or meth or anything else.
All right. Thank you, Congressman. We'll take one more question from Erica Yalowitz.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for bringing all of this information and these updates. I am a juvenile and domestic relations court intake officer and have been for a decade. I am seeing firsthand the families coming for child in need of services petitions and looking for support for fentanyl addiction. And we don't currently have local services. I am very grateful that you are working at the federal level, and I really believe that we need more advocacy to bring prevention, education services, intervention, harm reduction, and rehabilitation services. The closest detox facility right now where we are sending kids to is in Manassas, and locally Arlington Falls Church, Fairfax County, Alexandria. We don't have the medical supplies or the medical expertise to treat kids. As you know, the withdrawals are so hard that only medicine can help with treatment, and many times it's weekly medicine. So how do you believe we can access help to bring these resources to our area? Do you believe it's more at the state level, more at the federal level, a combination, local? How do you believe we can do that? Also, these intervention services have to be provided by a medical specialist. It has to be either a psychiatrist or a pediatrician with a specific certification, because it is addiction medicine. So that is also something that we are seeing we're short of.
Yeah. Erica, you just laid out a whole realm of problems. The good news is we passed more than 30 mental health bills in the last Congress. The biggest one being, I think the number $600 billion. So a big amount of money, almost as much as we spent on all the unemployment insurance during the pandemic, just for addiction treatment. And it's going to take a long time, not a long time, but it will take months, maybe even 1 or 2 years to get that money to the counties, to the cities, to the states. But the money is allocated to be spent. And as you say, a lot of it's going to be for addiction services. You probably read just this week, the FDA approved Narcan for over-the-counter sales. So we will have it pretty ubiquitously. You want to have it, obviously, in every police car and every ambulance, but often now in every business and in every school. Maggie Hassan, the senator from New Hampshire, has been pushing hard for buprenorphine. You probably could say it better than I can. So the fentanyl equivalent to methadone, getting much more of that and getting it into the hands of every physician in America, so that and nurse practitioners and physician assistants too. I'm really pleased that all the jails, Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, have pretty good addiction programs within the jails for the people that are going to be there, months or a couple of years. But the issue of dealing with the kids is all we can do is just continue to invest as much as we possibly can. And that means, asking the leaders out of our local governments and the state governments on top of whatever money we can send from the federal. But we're still, the Sackler opioid crisis, that has a long tail, but that's not so much the problem right now. People that got hooked after their surgery. This is more the kids that are smoking Percocet with fentanyl laced in it and dying in school or getting hooked on it. It's a much more pernicious, evil problem, and have to deal with it. So.
Thank you.
Thanks for your work too. It's difficult work.
You don't mind?
This is Mark Tony. Enjoyed canvassing with you in the past, and look forward to your campaign in the future. And wanted to ask you, did education come up at all when you were down in those countries? How
the education was progressing?
It didn't really. I don't really remember any specific thing other than when we were in Honduras, there was a lot of comment about how earnest the kids were, but how difficult the education infrastructure was. I mean, that the buildings themselves are awful. There's no electrical grid in Honduras. Even the businesses that want to come there and set up textile factories, they have to bring their own generators and bring their own fuel. So they're very dependent on fossil fuel to run the generators to provide the electricity. There's nothing like what we have in Virginia or in any state in America with an actual electrical grid that's providing electricity to everybody. You have many, I don't know what percentage it is, but a significant percentage of the homes with no electricity whatsoever. So the compared to this education our kids are getting in Northern Virginia, with their laptops and their beautiful schools and their good teachers, it's a world of difference. And of course, that means that you have these kids with, we're all born with a relatively narrow range of IQ, but then it depends on how is it nurtured after that. And without the nurturing, thank God for all the NGOs we have that are trying to do really good work in so many of the Central American countries. Because when you get them with the kids, they can get to really positive outcomes. But once again, as we see in so many societies, the people at the top are doing fine. That 10% or 15%. It's just trying to make sure that we get to the rest of the population, who still have just as much promise as anybody else at the day they're born.
Thank you, Congressman. We have one last question. Come on.
Council Walker, and I've been my share of canvassing, and I wanted to especially tell you how much I'm in awe of your work on artificial intelligence and going back to school, taking calculus on top of the billion other things you're doing. I just don't know how you do it. But you said something in your presentation which amazed me. You said that 3 years ago, illegal immigration from North Guatemala and El Salvador, which was legal 3 years ago, it's only 10% of what it was. Did I hear correctly? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I confess I didn't really hear or understand the question. But only because of the technology, not you. But.
Very hard. It was very hard to hear. Yeah, from that microphone.
Guatemala, which were the big sources of 3 years ago, that it is now only 10% of that. If that is true, that is a huge success story for whatever has been done, I would think.
Congressman, were you able to hear that?
I can't. I'm sorry. I heard a huge success story, and I heard early stuff about artificial intelligence, but I'm sorry I don't know how to respond.
I think I'm going to try to switch it up.
Give us a moment.
If anyone on the Zoom heard it, I'll do my best. Otherwise, yeah. I think those of us on the Zoom have the best connections. So.
Can you hear us now?
Much for being in person, right?
Can everyone hear us?
Yes.
Okay. All right. One more time.
Okay. Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. 2 years ago, they were immigration, but that immigration is now only.
They're not hearing.
They're not hearing.
We lost the mic.
My only suggestion is maybe if you can put it in the chat, or do it with the video off. It might be a clearer signal.
What was your question?
Please go. The question in the chat.
Boy, it was working there for a long time. What's the question? Education? Few words.
Honduras, Guatemala, and Honduras
Honduras, Guatemala.
Go ahead.
Were El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras were the source of most illegal immigration to the U.S. 3 years ago.
Okay.
And he said now their levels are only 10%.
Okay.
And if that's true, that's a huge success story for whatever was being done. So maybe it's something we should be trying to replicate. If something is working.
Right.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. You're absolutely right. It is a huge success story. And I think all of us on the trip, there, I think, Senator Carper, Senator Hassan, and a bunch of lowly members of the House, we were all astonished by how much the things had improved from the Northern Triangle, from those three countries. And in fact, if you look, they say almost every month, it's a different group that's dominating the people that show up at the southern border, our southern border. For a lot of the last year, it's been people from Ethiopia, a huge outsurge from Venezuela, of course, from Cuba, of course, Nicaragua, with all their problems. There've been a lot of people coming from there, and even Afghanistan. You think Afghanistan is a long way from the Mexican border with the U.S., but they'll come in. There's a piece in the New York Times tonight about crossing the Darien Gap from Colombia into Panama, and how they expect, I think they said 200,000 people to cross this completely roadless, filled with snakes and swamps area in this next year, just in order to try to get to our southern border. By the way, one of the other big changes was that Mexico has really stepped up its efforts at its southern border with both Honduras and Guatemala, so that in fact, one of the things that the President AMLO asked us to do was to help with the repatriation of people way before they get to El Paso or San Diego or Matamoros, is to help with the repatriation of Mexico's southern border. So they've done a lot of stuff really right. I did think that President Biden giving Kamala Harris responsibility for fixing the southern border was a little unfair, but a lot of good things have happened because of that.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Congressman Don Beyer. We can't thank you enough for coming out and answering all of our questions and giving us some insight on what's going on in Mexico and Central America.
Thank you. By the way, one of the things I would love to do is get Veronica Escobar to come speak to your caucus someday soon, because given that she represents El Paso, she was an immigration lawyer for a long time. She knows more about this than anybody I know on the Hill, and I know she'd love to come. We've already talked to her about it.
Congressman, I'm a familiar sound, I'm sure. You started this caucus 1 year ago with Linda Sanchez, and it has never been the same since. So yes, anybody like that you could bring, I'm sure the caucus would appreciate it. And I think Jairo tonight, considering this is his first night as chair now, has done one remarkable job. Thank you.
Trying not to mess up too bad.
And as a PS, Linda Sanchez's son got into Gonzaga, so we're all excited.
Oh, wow.
All right. Well, thank you again, Congressman. Really appreciate it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and close out the meeting.
Lisa Sales first.
I'm sorry.
Virginia President of NOW.
Oh, actually, we have one more speaker, Lisa Sales, the president of BOW. NOW, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see all your beautiful faces. I'm Lisa Sales, the president of the Virginia National Organization for Women. And the good news is, right, I'm here in Fairfax County. The bad news is I'm here in Fairfax County, where we have the best candidates. And I'm also the chair of the Virginia Now PAC. So y'all are making this really complicated and really hard on me. And I love you all. And I hate when our friends run, but I just wanted to say hi. We do have a PAC. You can go to vanow.org/PAC, and you can find out information about how to get endorsed. Many of you, I have applications from already. Some races we will choose to stay out of because we're fighting among friends. And some races will definitely be active in endorsing. So may the best man and woman win. So just wanted to say hi. Thank you. Thank you for the floor for a moment.
Thank you, Lisa.
And with that, I think we're going to go ahead and adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you. Have a good night.